Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Ed from me, and today we're going to be changing the oil in our Haldex system. The Haldex system is basically Volkswagen's way of putting engine power to the rear wheels. Basically what happens is it's an electronically controlled pump which senses when the front tires are actually losing grip, and it'll couple a pump which uses oil in a hydraulic system to basically put power to your rear wheels. And so on a regular day-to-day drive, unless you're losing grip to the front tires, you're really not actually going to be using that Haldex pump and using the power to the rear wheels. Volkswagen recommends that you actually change this oil every 30,000 miles. On some manuals, I saw it as high as 40,000 miles. However, it's always best to be on the safe side. I saw 30,000 miles, and so with this car being just over 30,000 miles now, it's time to actually change the oil. And of course, this maintenance item is something that only applies to the Golf R. It doesn't apply to the GTI or the regular Golf, as those cars do not actually put any power to the rear wheel. In order to change the oil in the Haldex system, you really only need one thing, and that one thing is going to be Volkswagen OEM high performance oil. Now this oil is part number G060175A2, and I got this off of ECS Tuning. This is a specific oil that works for the Haldex systems, and if you own a different generation of Golf R, you want to make sure that you get the specific oil that's for your generation. This really is the only thing that is 100% absolute must for this maintenance item. The rest of these items that I'm about to show you are very highly recommended, but not completely necessary. So these items right here are the drain plug and the fill plug for the Haldex system, and these are two items that I really highly recommend you replace when you do this service. This is similar to changing your engine oil. If you don't replace the drain plug in the oil pan, there is a chance that it could eventually leak. And so that's just one of those things that not everyone always does, but you should do if you're going to be servicing the car yourself. You don't want any of the oil to be leaking out. And so these drain plugs, they have a little copper washer in them, and basically it's a crush washer. So they are really one-time use only. So when you take this out, when I'm going to take it out in a little bit, it's going to be crushed already. You really don't want to reuse something that has been crushed once before. Finally, this item right here is optional, but very highly recommended, simply for the fact that it makes your life a lot easier when you're doing this service. This is a multifunction fluid pump kit. And this particular one I got from ECS Tuning also, mainly because this one was highly recommended and highly rated. It can do a bunch of different types of fluids, not only your Haldex fluid, but it can do your brake fluid, it can do a number of other things as well. And because it comes with a bunch of fittings, it'll work on many different cars. So I'll leave a link in the description below for where you can get all these parts. If you are thinking about doing this service yourself, I highly recommend you go check out the links in the description for ECS Tuning. They have a lot of information as well as kits where you could just buy one thing and it gives you all the part numbers that you need for this particular service item. So with that being said, we're going to get started. The first thing that we're going to do is actually lift up the car, and because the Haldex system is in the rear of the car, all we're going to have to do is really jack up the rear. And for that, what I'm going to do is just slide it onto some ramps, and I'm going to use a leveler to make sure that the car is level, because for this service you need your car to be completely level, or else the oil is not going to fill up exactly to the right level. Alright, so assuming that the body of the car here, the side skirt, is going to be the horizontal angle, we are going to put this leveler right here, and as you can tell, the bubble is right in the middle. And so you know that the car is now level, even though my driveway is slanted. And that works out perfectly because now we can get to the rear here, which actually has the Haldex system down below. Alright, so now we are underneath the car, and I want to show you exactly what this system entails. As you can see, this side is the front of the car, and this side is the back of the car. The drive shaft, which comes from the front, is right there, and it connects to this system right here, which is the Haldex system. The pump is this guy right here, and essentially what it does when the computer tells it to, because the front tires are slipping, is to couple this drive shaft spinning over to the axles which are connected to the rear wheels. So essentially what we're doing in this maintenance service is replacing the oil that's inside this system because there is wear and tear after about 30,000 miles. And the actual servicing is quite simple. There is an 8mm hex bolt right here, and then a 5mm right here. This is the fill, and this is the drain. So essentially what we're going to be doing now is simply undoing these two bolts, letting all the fluid drain out, closing it off, the drain plug at least, and then filling it up until the oil comes out. And that's how we know that the Haldex system has enough oil. There are a couple of nuances that I'll go through with you as I'm doing this service. But the first thing that we're going to do is take out this 5mm hex bolt, because we want to always make sure that we can take out the fill bolt before we drain any of the oil. Because the last thing that you want is to drain the oil, realize that this bolt here is stuck, and then you won't actually be able to refill the system with oil. So like I said, first thing we're going to do is take out this 5mm hex. We're going to follow it up by taking out this 8mm hex and letting all that oil drain out. All right, so I was able to loosen that up, which means that I'm now ready to get the 8mm hex to drain the oil. All right, so I'm keeping pressure on it until I feel that the threads are not catching anymore, like that, and I'll just remove this as quickly as possible and kind of inspect the oil as it's coming out. Right now, it actually looks pretty clear. I can actually still see through it. So it looks like the oil is actually in pretty good condition. But what we're gonna do now is basically just wait and let this completely drain out. I will remove the fill bolt as well to help with the draining. And now we're just going to wait until it completely drains before we put back in the drain plug. While we're letting it drain, now would be a good time to set up our pump. This is the first time that I'm using this pump, so you're getting a first-hand experience of what it's like. This pump really came highly recommended, and so instead of using one of those cheap ones that you just screw onto the bottle cap and pump by hand, this one is actually pressurized, so you do the pumping beforehand, and then it just basically does all the work for you afterwards. And I think the best part about this particular system is the fact that you can use it for a bunch of different fluids. And so with manual transmission cars, often you have to change the rear diff fluid, and then there is the brake fluid, which needs to be pressurized, things of that sort. This pump will actually take care of all of that. And essentially what that allows you to do is use this for a bunch of different functions, which is why I decided to actually get this pump. So the only pieces we will be using is this tube right here, and I'm just going to connect it to the pump here. Once that is connected, basically this end will go into the system. All right, so let's open this up. And we are going to fill up this pump kit with the oil. And I'm just going to make sure to fill this up slowly, even though I should be using a funnel. But now comparing this oil with the oil that came out of the car, it wasn't too much of a difference. This is definitely clearer, but the fact that the oil that came out of the Haldex system was still relatively clear makes me believe that the Haldex system is in pretty good working order. And I have no reason to believe it isn't. So That's a good sign. I'm going to close this off. All right, now we're just going to pump this up. And you can see here where the pressure's at, but we're going to pump this up to maybe 15 psi or so. All right, so we're just going to use any adapter here that'll basically fit on the end of this, and will also go into the hole. Something like this should work. I want something short that has an angle to it. And it actually has the applications for Ford, BMW, Honda, Volkswagen, Porsche, Audi, Mercedes. It actually has a bunch. So obviously this is a universal kit that works for a bunch of different applications. Perhaps something like this right on the end here. Oh, all right. So obviously this was open. Let's see if it's still open now. All right. So now we're closed. We've got pressure built up, and this system is ready to go into the car. All right, so it looks like it's finished draining. We're getting like a drop every 3 to 4 seconds. So I'm comfortable closing this off again and wiping this down. And we are going to tighten down that bolt because we won't need to take it out anymore. So there is a specific torque rating for this bolt that I'll put up on the screen, but for me this is just a 1/4 inch ratchet, and basically I'm just going to tighten it down, and I believe that it should be more than enough. So that should be good to go. I will make note that some people actually take out the pump here and replace the filter on it or replace the pump. I really don't think that's necessary, and essentially what you'd be doing is compromising some of the seals that are here. You'd be doing more work than necessary. And so what I'm going to do is actually leave the pump alone. So now what we're going to do is get to the next part, which is actually filling up the fluid. We're going to fill about 600 milliliters, and then we're going to turn the car on, let the pump run for a little bit, and then we're going to finish off by filling up the rest of it until the oil starts to leak out of it. So what I'm going to do now is get the pump, and we're going to start filling it up. All right, so my pump is now filled up. All I have to do is stick this side into the hole like that. Okay, this doesn't fit. All right, so it doesn't seem like any of the adapters actually fits into this hole right here. So I'm going to perhaps put a tube at the end of this that's even smaller, that'll fit into this hole, so that I can refill it. Otherwise, the next best thing I can do is start to grind this down a little bit so that it'll actually fit into the hole. But let's see if I have any tubing that'll fit into that hole first. All right, so minor inconvenience there, but what I had to do was create a little bit of an adapter. I basically put a smaller piece of tubing and taped it with the electrical taping, which will now allow me to fill this up with fluid and fit into this hole right here, like so. And if I open this, it should start going in. And it looks like it is. So I'm just gonna let that fill up, stand off to the side a little bit so I don't get oil on myself. But what I'm gonna do is just fill it up. About 600 milliliters later, which is basically about 3/4 of the way, I'm going to stop this, turn on the car for a minute, and then we're going to fill it up the rest of the way until oil actually starts coming out. All right, so it looks like oil is starting to drip out already. And at this point, I'm going to start the car and let it run for about a minute. All right, so now I'm just gonna let the car run for about a minute. And what that's gonna do is allow the pump to actually circulate the oil. And what that'll do is actually bring down the oil a little bit. And so when we fill it up, it'll actually be full. Whereas if you don't let the car actually run for a little bit and you just fill it up, once you actually start the car and start running it, the oil level is going to be a little bit too low. So that's essentially what we're letting it do right now. All right, so now that the car has run for about a minute, I just turned it off, and now the oil level should be down just a little bit, and we're just refilling it up. We're topping it off exactly to when it starts to leak, and that's when we can put in the fill plug again. All right, so for this step, you want to make sure that you have your fill plug ready, and you want to make sure that you don't touch your exhaust, because your car's been running for about a minute. The exhaust is already nice and toasty. You definitely do not want that to ruin your day. So what you're going to do is take your rag and just kind of clean off the area again. And you're just going to fill it up the rest of the way until it starts to leak fluid. Once it starts to leak fluid, then you know you have it at the right level. All right. So I'm just going to let the fluid in nice and slowly until it starts to leak. And it's starting to leak, as you can see, which means now we're ready for the fill plug. Now I'm just going to fill it back in by hand so far. All right, once this is hand tight, I'm just going to take my rag and wipe everything off. Make sure everything is nice and clean. And then again, I'm going to put the torque specs of this bolt on the screen so that you can see. All right, just going to torque it down with my 1/4 inch ratchet. All right, and that should be more than enough. Last step in this is basically to just wipe everything down. All right, so what I would do now that everything is done is I would get my car off the ramps and drive it around for a little bit, make sure that there is no oil residue anywhere, so that you know that the system is not actually leaking. But essentially that is the entire servicing of the Haldex system. All right guys, so that is how you service the Haldex system on your Mark 7 Golf R. I listed all the parts that you needed down in the description below, so if you are thinking about doing this service yourself, feel free to use the links in the description to get yourself the fluid, the pump, the drain, and the fill bolt as you find necessary. This job was pretty easy to do. It didn't take me long. I would say that in terms of difficulty, it might be a little bit harder than changing the engine oil, but really the main difference is that you actually need a pump to actually fill oil instead of just letting gravity fill your engine. But other than that, the process is relatively simple. Essentially, all you're doing is changing the oil. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I'm Zed for me. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.